What up, everybody? This is your boy Dedrian Colon from House of Rasslin, and this is my review/discussion regarding the build-up of the Royal Rumble, which by the time you guys watch this, it will be a few hours leading into the Royal Rumble. But like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification so that way you are notified when the House of Wrestling drops its latest content. Follow me, Dedrian180, on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. So this is going to be a unique review/discussion. I will touch on a few things that happened on the January 27th episode of SmackDown, but I will also touch on just the build up to Royal Rumble, which I'm primarily going to focus on. But before I do that, I am going to give you guys the results. So for the January 27th episode of WWE Smackdown, you had Rey Mysterio defeat Karrion Kross. You had Lacey Evans, who, well, she's back already. She defeated Jasmine Allure. We had Sheamus and Drew McIntyre get attacked by the Viking Raiders, which they forfeited their opportunity to advance in the tag team tournament, which Adam Pearce told Hit Row, you will compete, and their opponents wound up being Braun Strowman and Ricochet, which Braun Strowman and Ricochet won. Then we had Imperium defeat Legado El Fantasma. So the finals for the Tag Team Championship Contender Tournament is going to be Imperium versus Braun Strowman and Ricochet. And in the main event, you had Kevin Owens and Solo Sikoa, I believe, finish in a no contest because Sami Zayn got involved, which that's a whole other thing with that fantastic storyline. It started off in the night where the Usos arrived and Jey Uso was, trailing behind his brother, and he sees someone in a hoodie. It's Sami Zayn. Jey Uso's like, hey, you're not supposed to be here. Sami Zayn is like, you know what? Thank you. If you need anything, just hit me up. He's like, all right, cool. Later on, they got kicked out because they were confronting Kevin Owens. Jey Uso makes a phone call. Hey, I need you to do a favor. So that's what led to the whole no contest and everything. But getting into the build of Royal Rumble. So everything that happened tonight, mind you, this is the go home show for the Royal Rumble, which is airing tomorrow night, Saturday night. I'm looking forward to it. But one thing I've noticed about this Royal Rumble, and it's something that many people have been discussing lately, and that's podcasters, fellow wrestlers, and former wrestlers who have podcasts, and journalists, and whatever you want to call them. And it's not a diss or anything, but one thing that people have noticed is the booking of the WWE's women's division. You could say, hell, even the past year. Yeah, it's been really interesting. And, I mean, you could say, oh, man, last year's WrestleMania, you could say, about the women's division. And the reason why I'm bringing that up, and this goes into what I was referring to when I first started this video, was it seems like there's been more emphasis on the build to the men's Royal Rumble as opposed to the women's Royal Rumble. It just feels like this year's women's Royal Rumble is, man, how do I say it? It feels very vague. It doesn't feel like there's enough enthusiasm into it. And by that, I mean, it's not coming from the women's division or any of the women's wrestlers. It's coming in how they're presented. And mind you, many people could, it annoys me when people dog women wrestlers like, oh, well, they're not good. It's like, no. This is the same WWE women's division that was killing it since 20 13, 14, going as far back as NXT, and then when Sasha Banks and Charlotte, Bayley, Becky Lynch, the Women's Revolution that led to the Evolution pay-per-view. Mind you, the first women's Royal Rumble match was 2018. So you're looking at, what, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 5 years? In 5 years, it went from, oh my God, this is going to be an awesome Royal Rumble, to where it's been presented, where it's just very vague. And tonight, I mean, no exception. Look at the Lacey Evans Jasmine Allure match. It was a blow off match. I don't want to say blow off match, but it was a squash match. And the week before, like, there was just very little. It just feels like there's been very little emphasis on the women's division. And of course, many people bring up Alexa Bliss and her involvement with the Bray Wyatt and Bianca Belair, but even that is just very vague, because it just feels like, okay, we know where this is going. She's going to be evil. We're going to have this whole Bray Wyatt, Uncle Howdy mashup, and, it's going to have a Bray Wyatt theme, which could be anything. But what we've come to accustom with, or what accompanies Bray Wyatt's storytelling, is a lot of vignettes and promos and just a lot of that stuff. And just, I don't know, it's weird, but it's very obvious to see that there has been a major emphasis on the men's division and not so much on the women's division. And what I also want to touch on is, by noticing that there's not a balance, and that was something that the audience, and comment below what you guys feel about this, but the 2018 Women's Royal Rumble, both Royal Rumbles, there was a balance. 2019, there was a balance. 2020, there was a balance. 2021, there was a balance. 2022, well, last year's Royal Rumble was just, yeah, that was the Royal Rumble where it was reported that the morale was just, and you had the whole Shane McMahon thing. So again, it was not a Royal Rumble that many people enjoyed, but guess what? It was balanced. And it just feels like this year's Royal Rumble, like there's an imbalance as far as the build up to the men's Royal Rumble as opposed to the women's Royal Rumble. And I mean, you look at who, the favorite is. The favorite is Rhea Ripley, and outside of that, there's not a lot of people you could say, man, they're going to win the Royal Rumble and they're going to, go on to WrestleMania. And it's just really, it's disappointing, because there's so much talent there. And there's been numerous Smackdowns where there's just been one match or very little match. And if it's been, 5-minute matches, very quick matches. And it's just like, all right, they've done their thing. And it's just really interesting. Now that could change with Charlotte Flair returning, and also as we get closer to WrestleMania and after WrestleMania, that could change. But with the track record that we've seen since, man, it's hard. I mean, we could say since Triple H took over creative, but again, of course, the whole Vince McMahon returning to, the chairman of the board, and that whole stuff that's a whole nother video. But yeah, it's crazy to think, because the Bianca Alexa match, it's gonna be a good one, but it just feels like it's just been really vague. And of course, tonight they had, what was it? The video packages hyping up the Royal Rumble. You had Rhea Ripley. We could possibly get some sort of dissension, beginning of dissension with Damage Control, which we could see that a mile away. But yeah, it's just really, it's unfortunate that this discussion has been happening considering what the WWE women's division has been the past several years. Like it's been at certain points better than the men's division. And of course they've main evented, nights of WrestleMania. So it's like, how do you go from that to, this? And for me, I enjoy Rhea Ripley, Bianca Belair, Becky Lynch, even some of the women in NXT, Zoe Stark, Roxanne, Cora Jade, who else? Gigi Dolan and JC Jade, um, Alba Fry. Even on the main roster, you have Alexa Bliss, does great work, Nikki Cross, but it just feels like it's in a very vague state, and I don't know. I'm interested to see how this Royal Rumble for the women will play out because there are empty spots, and of course with the men's there's empty spots, and it just feels like even with the potential of surprises, um, it's more favored to the men's side. Of course, the big favorite to win the men's Royal Rumble is Cody Rhodes. After tonight, Brock Lesnar's in the Royal Rumble, Bobby Lashley's in the Royal Rumble. We don't know if Sami Zayn is going to be in the Royal Rumble. We shall see. But Kevin Owens is fighting Roman Reigns, and of course, the Bloodline is the biggest storyline in WWE and pretty much in all of wrestling. So it's understandable why there's been emphasis on that story, but at the same time, there's been, like I said, a lack of balance on the emphasis for both these Royal Rumbles, where there's a balance of enthusiasm, excitement, intrigue, curiosity, optimism, anticipation. Like, man, who's going to show up here? Who's going to show up here? Again, like I said, it seems like it's favored more to the men's side, and hopefully this changes after Royal Rumble, and hopefully it changes at the Royal Rumble with the women's Royal Rumble match, because there's a lot of talent there, and it just feels like they've been somewhat underutilized. And yeah, it's just really interesting that WWE has them in this position. And by position, how they're presenting them, it's really interesting considering, WWE's women's division was the benchmark of any women's division in all of professional wrestling. And right now, it just seems like, I don't know if it's, I mentioned this on a few reviews, that it feels like WWE is somewhat in a holding pattern with some storylines outside of the Bloodline, Sami Zayn, Bray Wyatt storyline. It just feels like it's a holding pattern. It does feel like it could be in a holding pattern with the women's division, but it's really, man, it's really weird considering that when you watch NXT, and I know many people rag on NXT like, oh, it's not this, it's this or that, but when you watch it, there's more women's matches on NXT and even NXT Level Up than there is on Raw and SmackDown. And that's another weird thing, because it's like, okay, are they preparing? Of course, they're preparing the next generation of, women wrestlers for WWE, but at the same time, it's like, are they putting the holding pattern on the main roster so they can elevate the women's roster, which is kind of weird? I don't think that's the case, but, as a fan and, many people who watch this, there's, it's not hard to come to that conclusion. Even if it's not true or anything, it's just hard to, not to come to that conclusion when you just see, like, man, there's more women's matches in NXT and there's more build for NXT and NXT's, pay-per-views than it is for the women's matches, leading up to Royal Rumble. So it's interesting. Let's see what happens at Royal Rumble. My odds-on favorite is Rhea Ripley. She's the standout. She's been the standout for Judgment Day. I know many people have considered her to be the leader. I consider her to be the leader of Judgment Day because if you take Rhea Ripley out of Judgment Day, it's really like, do I really want to see this? And of course, let's give her credit. Like, she's one of the main reasons why we've seen this renewed interest in Dominic Mysterio. Ever since he's gone to jail, like, it's just like, it's funny for me. I enjoy this. Like, man, this is so corny yet funny. It's like, this is entertaining. So yeah, I do see her as the odds-on favorite. On the men's side, of course, it's Cody Rhodes, but then again, we don't know if Sammy's in there, and if Sammy's in the Royal Rumble, that's a whole nother dilemma. Like, Cody Rhodes came back, and everybody's behind Sammy. Will they turn on Cody? It's a lot of stuff going on, but man, it's an interesting state that WWE is in regarding their men's roster and their women's roster. That, like I said, it feels, but I mean, you go back and watch SmackDown and Raw for the past 3 months, 4 months, it's hard to dispute that there seems to be more emphasis on the men's side than the women's side. And hopefully that changes because, when WWE has let the women wrestle, and I mean wrestle, man, they're outshining the guys. And it's like, oh, we need to watch this. Like, they're laying it in. Like, okay, I need to watch this. But yeah, the past several months has just been like, okay. And of course, bringing up the whole WWE potentially selling. You bring up the whole, if they're being sold to, the private investment fund, that's in another country, and that country has some strict laws as far as women. So it's like, is this somewhat of a, kind of like grooming to be potentially sold to that group? Because it kind of looks like it. It's hard to dispute it, but it kind of looks like it is. And that's another thing regarding this whole subject, as far as the women being more, or the men being more of an emphasis on the storylines than the women. Is what's really going on here? Like, is there other reasons why we've seen this imbalance of the men and women in WWE? Like, it's really interesting. And let's face it, you look at what one of the reasons why Sasha Banks left was the tag team division, and look at where the women's tag team titles are, the state it's in. Like, who are the tag teams outside of who are the damn champs? Dakota Kai and Io Sky. Like, who are the champions? Like, let me rephrase that. We know who the champions are, but who are the challengers? That's what I mean. Like, who are the challengers? Like, it's really weird, man. This is really weird, and it's one of the reasons why I want to do this video, because it's something that a lot of people are discussing, but it's not really being talked about because it's glaring. Like, this isn't something like, it's just like, no, it's very glaring that, most of the women's storylines, most of the WWE storylines are vague outside of the Bloodline, Sammy and Bray, but especially in the women's division, like, it's very vague. Like, Damage Control, They started off hot, and then it's vague. It's not so much they've regressed. It's just here, and they haven't progressed. And in professional wrestling, when there isn't a regression or progression, that's just like you get borderline. It gets borderline apathetic, where you don't even have a concern or care, which is a bad place you want to be in, as far as presenting um, wrestlers in professional wrestling. Because when an audience doesn't care, like, that's bad. Like, if there's a regression, the crowd is going to react by boo, boo, boo. But when you get to a point where, again, where it's vague storytelling and a vague presentation and nobody cares, they're not going to react. And that's something we're seeing a lot of. And like I said, hopefully it changes. But man, this build up to this year's Royal Rumble has been very peculiar. And like I said, it just looks, the emphasis, the attention, the presentation, it seems more heavily on the men's Royal Rumble than the women's Royal Rumble. I mean, another thing to look at, if you take Rhea Ripley out of the women's Royal Rumble, like, it becomes a Royal Rumble of apathy, where there's no care or concern. It's like, all right, whoever wins, go to Royal Rumble. And I'm not saying that's how I feel, but it's how this is being presented on television. Like, this isn't good. Because, I mean, most of the talk, and granted, it's rightfully so, most of the talk for WrestleMania is Roman Reigns, Cody Rhodes, Stone Cold Steve Austin, who else? Seth Rollins. Those are mostly men. Those are all men. When it comes to the women's side, it's like, okay, we're probably going to get Bianca and Rhea. That's it. And even with Charlotte coming back, it's just like, it just doesn't have that same enthusiasm, optimism, and grit that it had the past 5 years, ever since 2018, the first women's Royal Rumble. It just doesn't have that, all those elements to it, where like I mentioned before, it's almost borderline apathetic, where there's just no concern, and it's being presented in a way that it's close. And that's something I want to emphasize. It's close to being apathetic. I want to emphasize that. Granted, I'm looking forward to the Royal Rumble, but man, the way the women's division has been presented on Raw and SmackDown. Of course, this Monday, the ladder match, or not the ladder match, the cage match between Becky Lynch and Bayley, that ended in a no contest. And then later on, there was a match between Bianca Belair and Sonya Deville, which just it's really weird, man, that WWE has presented the women's division like this. It's really weird, and to some extent awkward. Like, this doesn't. I'm somewhat I have been accustomed, maybe you have been accustomed to WWE's women's division being presented in a very prestigious, intense, high enthusiasm, high optimism, with a high level anticipation surrounding it. And man, it's just, very vague. But let me know what you guys think. Comment below. Do you guys sense or see that there's more of a emphasis and given to the men's Royal Rumble as opposed to the women's Royal Rumble, where the women's Royal Rumble just is very vague. Like there doesn't seem to be as much emphasis and enthusiasm and just raising it up to like, hey man, this is gonna be really good. Let me know what you guys think. So that is my brief SmackDown review slash discussion heading into the Royal Rumble tomorrow. Of course, if you're watching this video, this is before the Royal Rumble, and you could say a few hours before Royal Rumble. But yeah, this is going to be interesting how this Royal Rumble plays out, because there's a lot of things that maybe 3 months ago it was like, all right, yeah, we know Cody's coming back, he's going to win the Royal Rumble. But now there's a lot of things that are at play, both in the shows and of course outside of the show with the potential sale. It's interesting. But yeah, my predictions, I believe Cody's winning the Royal Rumble for the men's side. Rhea Ripley's winning the women's Royal Rumble. I believe Alexa Bliss is probably going to dethrone Bianca Belair. I believe Roman Reigns will probably defeat Kevin Owens. So, and I do believe Bray Wyatt is going to defeat LA Knight in the Pitch Black. I think we might get the unveiling of who Uncle Howdy is, and we might get that closure somewhat of Alexa Bliss joining the Bray Wyatt thingamajigga. We'll see how that plays out. But yeah, man, there is a disparity between the presentation of the men's Royal Rumble and the women's Royal Rumble, but we shall see. So that is my review. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to all the subscribers of House of Wrestling. I really appreciate it. And man, let's see what happens at the Rumble. So with that,